Hello, it's Hannah. Yeah, I wrote the Adult Sabbath School Bible Study Guide, April, May, June 2022. The booklet of the monthly booklet. So the second quarterly. Here, the title is the Genesis. I brought this booklet. I just come out my garden with the wind and the background of the fruit trees, plum trees and apple trees, and yeah, windy day, but it's so cool, not cool. So let's just read this booklet. All contents consist of the 13 lessons. Lesson 1, the creation. Lesson 2, the 3, Cain and his legacy. The 4, the flood. 5, all nations and Babel. 6, the roots of Abraham. 7, the covenant with Abraham. 8, the promise. 9, Jacob the supplanter. 10, Jacob, Israel. 11, Joseph, master of dreams. 12, Joseph, prince of Egypt. 13, Israel in Egypt. Let's go to the prelude, the book of the beginning. It's just written by Jacques B. Duncan, DHL, PhD, is emeritus professor of Hebrew and Old Testament exegesis at the Seventh-day Adventist Theological Seminary, Andrews University. Yeah, the book of the beginning. I love the book of Genesis, about the book of the beginning. Genesis is about Jesus, our creator, Jesus, our sustainer, Jesus, our redeemer. Writing millennia after the Genesis text itself had been penned by Moses, and reaching back across those ages to the patriarchs' very words. The Apostle John reveals Jesus in the creation account. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of man. John, the book of John 1:1-4. What did John write here? In the beginning, all things that were made, all things that once didn't exist, came into existence by Jesus. All creation, from galaxies hurtling across the cosmos in staggering pinwheels of fire and light, to the meticulous DNA woven miraculously into the cell, to quantum waves. Quantum waves. Jesus created and sustains it all, and the book of Genesis is the first story in Scripture, both this creation and the redemption of this creation. Here in this book is the world's only official account of our origins. The English word Genesis is derived from the Greek Genesis, which means beginning, itself derived from the Hebrew Bereshit, in the beginning, the first word of the book, hence the first word of the entire Bible. Genesis gives us the foundation, the base upon which all the following scriptures rest, because it is first, and so foundation to all that comes after. Genesis is probably the most quoted or referred to book in the rest of the scriptures. Genesis is important because it is the book that, more than any other work anywhere, helps us understand just who we are as human beings. Our truth is especially important now, in a day when we humans are deemed as nothing but accidents, chance creations of a purely materialistic universe. Or, as one physicist put it, we humans are organized mud, which is to some degree true, though for him the laws of nature alone organized it. Genesis, however, reveals to us our true origin, that we were beings purposely and perfectly made in the image of God in a perfect world. Perfect, I'm sorry. Genesis also explains the fall. That is why our world is no longer perfect and why we as humans aren't as well. Genesis, however, also comforts us with God's promise of salvation in a whole world that in and of itself offers us nothing but suffering and death. Genesis also comforts us with God's promise of salvation in a world that in and of itself offers us nothing but suffering and death, which is dramatic stories of miracles, creation, birth, the rainbow, and judgments, the flood, Sodom and Gomorrah, witnessing to God's holy presence. Genesis is awe-inspiring, but Genesis also is a book with moving human stories of love. Jacob and Rachel of hatred, Jacob and Esau of birth, Isaac, Jacob's sons of death, Sarah, Rachel, Jacob, Joseph of mother, Cain, Simeon, and Levi, and forgiveness, Esau and Jacob, Joseph and his brothers. It also is an insurrection book with lessons on ethics, Cain, Babel, on faith, Abraham, Jacob, and on the hope and promise of redemption, the crushing of the serpent, the promised land. During this quarter, not only will we read and study the book of Genesis, but we also will enjoy its beautiful stories and learn to walk better with the Lord of creation, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Meanwhile, the geographical movements of the book, from Eden to Babel, to the promised land, to Egypt, to the prospect of the promised land, remind us of our nomadic journeys and the nature of our hope for the real promised land, the new heaven and the new earth. As we follow the various characters across the pages of Genesis, we will discover that regardless of how different the time, place, culture, and circumstance, often their stories are in many ways ours as well. So I wanna add the pre-story of the book of the beginning. There are lesson 1, the creation, March 26th through April 1. I want to read all of these lessons, 13th maybe 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. Then you can go through all these booklets, and then you're gonna read or study on every week. There are many the study group in English or the other languages too. So you're gonna go lesson 1 through 13. The first one, I will go for lesson 1, the creation. Read for this week's study Psalm 100, 1 through 3, Genesis 1, Genesis 2, Exodus 20, 8 through 11, Exodus 40, 33, Matthew 25, 14 through 30, Matthew 19, 7 through 9. Memory text. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:1. The book of Genesis, and hence the whole Bible begins with God's acts of creation. This fact is very important because it means that our creation marks the beginning of human and biblical history. This truth also implies that the Genesis creation story has the same historical veracity as other events of human and biblical history. Windy make disturb this recording sometimes, but if you go to the Bible, the study Bible, I already read it to you. So you're gonna go to the Bible. Yeah. Sorry. The book of Genesis, and hence the whole Bible begins with God's acts of creation. This fact is very important because it means that our creation marks the beginning of human and biblical history. This truth also implies that the Genesis creation story has the same historical veracity as other events of human and biblical history. The two creation texts in Genesis 1 and 2 contain lessons about God and humanity. As we study this week, we will understand better the profound meaning of the seventh-day Sabbath. We will ponder God's act of creating humans in His image and out of the dust too. We will ever, and by its connection with we will be intrigued by the purpose of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and by its connection with the tree of life. The most important lesson of the biblical stories of the beginnings is lesson on grace. Our existence is purely an act of grace. God created the heavens and the earth while humans were not yet present. Just as our creation was, our redemption is too a gift from God. And how profound it is that both concepts, creation and redemption, exist in the seventh-day Sabbath commandment. Sunday, March 27, the God of creation. Read Psalm 101 through 3. What is the human response to the God of creation, and why? In Genesis 1, the first message of the creation account is God. We hear it in the translation. In the beginning, God, Genesis 1:1. In the first line, Genesis 1, and the word God is placed in the middle of the verse and is underlined by the strongest accent in the Hebrew liturgical traditional chanting in order to emphasize the importance of God. The creation text begins then with an emphasis on God, the author of creation. in the book of Genesis begins, in fact, with two different presentations of God. The first creation account, Genesis 1 through 2, 4, presents God as infinitely far from humans. The transcendent God, Elohim, whose name speaks of the supremacy of God. The name Elohim denotes preeminence and strength, and the use of the plural form of the word Elohim expresses the idea of majesty and transcendence. The second creation account, Genesis 2:4 through 25, presents God as up close and personal, the immanent God, Yahweh, whose name many believe denotes closeness and relationship. The creation text as a whole is then an implicit appeal to worship God. First, to be aware of God's infinite grandeur and power, and at the same time to acknowledge our dependence on Him because He created us and not we ourselves. Psalm 103. This is why many of the Psalms often associate worship with creation. Psalm 95, 1 through 6, and 139, 13 and 14, compare with Revelation 14, 7. This twofold view of a God who is both majestic and powerful and who also is close, loving, and in a relationship with us makes an important point about how we should approach God in worship. Awe, awe and reverence go along with joy and the assurance of God's proximity, forgiveness, and love. See Psalm 2:11. Even the sequence of the two presentations of God is meaningful. The experience of God's proximity and the intimacy of His presence follows the experience of God's distance. Only when we have realized that God is great shall we be able to appreciate His grace and enjoy in trembling His wonderful and loving presence in our lives. Think about the vast power of God who upholds the cosmos and yet can be so near to each of us. Why is this amazing truth so amazing? Monday, March 28th. The creation. Let's read Genesis 1, 4, 10, 12, 18, 21, 25, 31, and Genesis 2, 1 through 3. What is the significance of the refrain, "It was good," in the first creation account? What is implied lesson contained in the conclusion of creation? Genesis 2, 1 through 3. At each step of the creation account, God evaluates His work as good. Yeah, it is thoughtful. Yeah, it is generally understood that this adjective means that God's work of creation was successful, and that God's observation that it was good means that it worked. The light was illuminating, Genesis 1:4. The plants were yielding fruit, Genesis 1:12, and so forth. But this word referred to more than the efficiency of a function. The Hebrew word tov also, his word as tov, good, Hebrew, referred to more than the efficiency of a function. The Hebrew word tov also is, I wonder, it just the English alphabet sound. T of V looks like, but I wonder how to read in Hebrew. also is used in the Bible to express an aesthetic appreciation of something beautiful, Genesis 24:16. It also is used in contrast to evil, Genesis 2:9, which is associated with death, Genesis 2:17. The phrase "it was good" means that the creation was working nicely, that it was beautiful and perfect, and that there was no evil in it. The world was not yet like our world, affected by sin and death, an idea formed in the introduction to the second creation account. See Genesis 2:5. This description of the creation radically contradicts the theories of evolution, which dogmatically declare that the world shaped itself progressively through a succession of accidental happenings, starting from an inferior condition and progressing to a superior one. In contrast, the biblical author affirms that God intentionally and certainly created the world, Genesis 1:1. There was nothing happenstance or trancy about any of it. The world did not come about by itself, but only as the result of God's will and word. Genesis 1:3. The verb bara, create, translated in Genesis 1, as in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, occurs only with God as his subject, and it denotes abruptness. God spoke, and it was so. The creation text informs us that everything had been done then, Genesis 1:31, and according to the Creator himself, it was all judged very good. Genesis 1:31, Genesis 1:1 states the event itself, the creation of heaven and earth, and Genesis 2:1 declares that the event was finished, and it was all completed, including the Sabbath, in 7 days. Why does the idea of billions of years of evolution completely nullify the Genesis creation story? Why are the two views incompatible in every way? Tuesday, the Sabbath. Read Genesis 2 and 3, and Exodus 20:8-11. Why is the seventh day Sabbath related to creation? How does this connection impact how we keep the Sabbath? It is precisely because God ended his works of creation that he instituted the Sabbath. The seventh-day Sabbath is, therefore, the expression of our faith that God finished his work then, and that he found it very good. To keep the Sabbath is to join with God in the recognition of the value and beauty of his creation. We can rest from our works just as God had rested from his. Sabbath keeping means saying yes to God's very good creation, which includes our physical bodies. Contrary to some ancient and modern beliefs, nothing in Scripture or the New Testament denigrates the body as evil. That's pagan concept, not a biblical one. Instead, Sabbath keepers are grateful for God's creation, which includes their own flesh, and that is why they can enjoy the creation and why they take care of it. The Sabbath, which marks the first end of human history, also is a sign of hope for suffering humankind and for the groaning of the world. It is interesting that the praise finishes the work, reappears at the end of, or reappears reappears at the end of the construction of the sanctuary, Exodus 40:33, and again at the end of the building of Solomon's temple, 1 Kings 7:40-51. Both places where the lesson of the gospel and the salvation had been taught. After the Sabbath at the end of the week points to the miracle of salvation, which will take place only through the miracle of a new creation. Isaiah 65:17, Revelation 21:1. The Sabbath is a sign at the end of our human week that the suffering, the trials of this world will have an end as well. This is why Jesus chose the Sabbath as the most appropriate day to heal the sick. Luke 13:16. Contrary to whatever traditions the leaders were stuck in by the Sabbath healings, Jesus pointed the people and us to the time when all pain, or suffering, or death will be over, which is the ultimate conclusion to the salvation process. Hence, each Sabbath points us to the hope of redemption. By resting on the Sabbath day, how are we experiencing the rest and salvation that we have in Jesus now, and that which will be fulfilled ultimately in the creation of the new heaven and new earth? The Wednesday, March 30, the creation of humanity. The creation of human is God's last act of creation, at least in the Genesis account. Humans are the culmination of the whole earthly creation, the purpose for which the earth was made. Read Genesis 1:26-29 and Genesis 2:7. What is the connection between these two different versions in regard to the creation of humanity? That God has created humans in His image is one of the boldest statements of the Bible. Only humans have been created in the image. Genesis 1:25. God created man in His own image. Genesis 1:27. Emphasis added. This formula has often been limited to the spiritual nature of humans, which is interpreted to mean that the image of God is understood to signify only the administrative function of representing God, or the spiritual function of relationship with God or with each other. While these understandings are correct, they fail to include the important physical reality of this creation. Both dimensions are indeed included in the two words, image and likeness, describing this process in Genesis 1:26, while the Hebrew word tselem, image, refers to the concrete shape of the physical body. The word demute, likeness, refers to abstract qualities that are comparable to the divine person. Therefore, the Hebrew notion of the image of God should be understood in the holistic sense of the biblical view of human nature. The biblical text affirms that human individuals, men and women, have been created in God's image physically as well as spiritually, as Ellen G. White clearly comments when Adam came from the Creator's hand, he bore in his physical, mental, and spiritual nature, a likeness to his maker. Education, page 15. In fact, this holistic understanding of the image of God, including the physical body, is reaffirmed in the other creation account, which says that man became a living being, Genesis 2:7, literally a living soul, nephesh, as the result of two divine operations, God formed and God breathed. Note that the breath often refers to the spiritual dimension, but it also is closely tied to the biological capacity for breathing, the part of the man that was formed of the dust of the ground. It is the breath of life, that is breath spiritual and life physical. God will later perform a third operation, this time to create the woman from the body of the man, Genesis 2:21-22, a way to emphasize that she is of the same nature as the man. Thursday, the duty of humanity. As soon as God created the first man, he offered him three gifts: the Garden of Eden, Genesis 2:8, food, Genesis 2:16, and the woman, Genesis 2:12. Read Genesis 2:15-17. What is man's duty toward creation and toward God? How do these two duties relate to each other? The first duty of man concerns the natural environment in which God has put him to tend and keep it. Genesis 2:15. The verb aved, tend, refers to work. It is not enough to receive a gift. We have to work on it and to make it fruitful. A lesson that Jesus will repeat in his parable of the talents, Matthew 25:14-30. The verb shamar, keep, implies the responsibility to preserve what has been received. The second duty concerns his food. We have to remember that God gave it to humans. See Genesis 1:29. Excuse me. God also said to Adam that you may freely eat, Genesis 2:16. Humans didn't create the trees or the food on them. They were a gift of grace. But there is a commandment here as well. They were to receive and enjoy God's generous gift of every tree. As a part of this grace, though, God added a restriction. They should not eat from one particular tree. Enjoying without any restriction will lead to death. This principle was right in the Garden of Eden, and in many ways that same principle exists today. The third duty of man concerns the woman. God's third gift: man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. Genesis 2:24. This extraordinary statement is a powerful expression that highlights human responsibility toward the conjugal covenant and the purpose of living one flesh, meaning one person. Compare with Matthew 19:1-9. The reason it is the man and not the woman who should leave his parents may have to do with the biblical generic use of the masculine. Hence, perhaps the commandment applies to the woman too. Either way, the bond of marriage, though a gift from God, entails human responsibility. Once the gift has been received, the responsibility that rests with both the man and the woman to fulfill it faithfully. Think about all that you have been given by God. What are your responsibilities with what you have been given? Yeah, last one, Friday, April 1. Yeah, further thought, read Ellen G. White, The Science and the Bible, page 128 and 29. In Education, The Creation in the Story of Redemption, page 21, 22. Since the book of Nature and the book of Revelation bear the impress of the same mastermind, they cannot but speak in harmony by different methods and in different languages. They witness to the same great truth. Science is ever discovering new wonders, but she brings from her research nothing that rightly understood conflicts with divine revelation. The book of nature and the written word shed light upon each other. They make us acquainted with God by teaching us something of the laws through which He works. Influences erroneously erroneously drawn from facts observed in nature have, however, led to suppose the conflict between science and revelation, and in the effort to restore harmony, interpretations of Scripture have been adopted that undermine and destroy the force of the Word of God. Geology has been thought to contradict the literal interpretation of the Mosaic record of the creation. Millions of years, it is claimed were required for the evolution of the earth from chaos, and in order to accommodate the Bible to this supposed revelation of science. The days of creation are assumed to have been vast, indefinite periods covering thousands or even millions of years. Such a conclusion is wholly uncalled for. The Bible record is in harmony with itself and with the teaching of nature. Ellen G. White, Education, page 128 and 29. There are discussion questions, 3 discussion questions, and there are inside story still left, and 38 minutes now passing by. Questions number 1. Why would the quality of our faith is affected if we believed that these stories of the beginnings were legends, myths, essentially designed to instruct us in spiritual lessons, but without historical reality? What clues in the biblical text suggest that the biblical author knew that they were historical, just as the rest of the stories in the book of Genesis are? What is Jesus' testimony about the historical truth of these stories? Second, number 2, what does the Genesis story teach us about the importance of stewardship of the earth? How can we good stewards of our planet while at the same time avoiding the danger of war but worshiping the creation itself, as opposed to the Creator, which is a very real temptation? See Romans 1:25. Number 3, despite the ravages of sin over the long millennia, in what ways does the original wonder and beauty and majesty of the very good creation still manifest itself to us, speaking to us in powerful ways of God's goodness and might? Yeah, there are inside the story. Today I read already about the pre-story, so it takes maybe 7 minutes. And the 30 minutes I read of this lesson study during the 7 days one. And there are the tip of the inside story marked out. And personally, I like to read this, the inside story from the um, yeah from the last year 22. Now a second year nutrition major plans to become a missionary in Mozambique, where many malnutrition is a serious problem. Part of the 13th Sabbath offering 3 years ago helped the Mozambique Adventist University expand its nutrition department with new classrooms and equipment provided by the General Conference Office of Adventist Mission, which uses Sabbath School mission offering to spread the gospel worldwide. Read now stories daily at AdventistMission.org. Yeah, it comes from Mozambique. Students mocked Rashia, Samila, Yashen. Yeah, my English is just the second one, so just read this one. For skipping classes on Saturdays in Mozambique, you came here to this university to study, not to follow your church's teachings, said one. You are crazy, said another. It all began when Lisa was struggling with her mechanical engineering studies during her first semester at the public university, and she found relief listening to music shared by a Seventh-day Adventist classmate, Belisario. Yeah. Then she and Belisario began to study the Bible together. Lisa had other new friends, and they also studied the Bible. The more she studied, the more she felt confused. The two Bible studies didn't agree about the Sabbath. She quit both to search the Bible for herself prayerfully. She read the fourth commandment in Exodus 28 through 11, which begins, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, and KJV. She read the law's call in Isaiah 58:13 to turn away from doing your pleasure on my holy day and call the Sabbath a delight, and KJV, and Jesus' words, if you love me, keep my commandments, John 14:15, New King James Version. She decided to keep the Sabbath. At first, Lisa hid her decision. She was afraid of being ridiculed, and she didn't want to ask teachers to be excused from Saturday classes. She also worried about what her parents would say. However, she couldn't keep her convictions to herself for long, and she announced at the end of the second semester that she would become an Adventist. Her worst fears materialized. Former friends taunted her, and when they saw her working with Belisario, sneered. Oh, those Adventist teachers refused to reschedule Saturday classes, and her grades dropped. If you don't like it here, just leave. Teacher said. Her mother was furious, and her father disowned her. Then Lisa met a visiting student from Mozambique Adventist University at her church on Sabbath. She was excited to learn about an Adventist university in Mozambique, and she begged her mother to allow her to transfer. Her mother initially refused, but unexpectedly changed her mind after Lisa, like Queen Esther, prayed and fasted for 3 days for God to intervene. A short time after changing universities, she told her mother that she no longer needed help with the expenses. Her new library job covered her costs. Her mother was astonished. Indeed, the Lord is not your stepfather, but your real father. Yeah, she said. Yeah, it's just like Lisa here. You can see here. Yeah, thank you everybody. And I read it through. Though I just got all of this, the lesson study, but I gonna read all through 1 through 13 lessons. Then the Genesis will be more will occur to more remind of through all the nature. Yeah, this is the already spring. There are lots of flowers, and yeah, the apple. This side is apple tree, and that one exactly the plum trees. Yeah, so you're gonna see green bird maybe at the end of March or April. It will be lately uh, come out green leaves from the apple trees, especially plum trees. Yeah, so let I show you this so beautiful flowers, and this also, and I gonna end the